You are Locked On Bulls Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Chicago on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Bulls Postcast. I am Joe George. The Bulls lose 123-111. Zach LaVine goes scorched earth in the first half, but the 20 turnovers in this game led the Bulls into their demise. Today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome in to the Locked On Bulls Postcast on the Locked On Chicago YouTube channel. My name's Joe George. This is going to be a recording. This is going to be the only ever one. We had some audio issues on the live show, so we're taking a second shot at this. So normally we'll be live after every single Bulls, Bears, Cubs, and Notre Dame Fighting Irish football game. You can find me on Twitter at Joe George Radio. Same with TikTok and Instagram as well. So if you're here for the first time, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You'll be able to find the audio on all the normal audio channels for Locked On Bulls, Irish, Cubs, and Bears as well. But thanks for checking this out. Let's talk about today's game because it was something. The Bulls lose 123-111. And look, the biggest takeaway from this game today is honestly, it's one simple thing. Sloppy basketball. That's what we saw in this first game. And it was really disappointing to see this level of sloppy basketball from the Bulls in the first game of the season. There's 81 more of these to go. Maybe more, probably not. But 81 more of these to go at a minimum to fix this stuff. But we'll start with the 20-plus turnovers. At one point, the Pelicans had 30 points off the Bulls' turnovers. And it's not like they were forcing all of these. And that's why it was a tough watch a lot in this game for the Bulls because you just have errant passes, bad passes, and some steals from the Pelicans actually making you work for it a little bit. But the ones that definitely stood out the most, obviously, and not to pick on Kobe White here to start, but his not best game he's had as a Chicago Bull, obviously. A lot of the going up for a pass and going up into the air and then having no idea what to do with the basketball, nowhere to go with the basketball. So he's trying to just get rid of it so he doesn't get a travel. And he ends up forcing it, having a turnover, and the Pelicans take it the other way and score pretty easily. We saw a lot of that. We saw a lot of sloppy passes where, guys were trying to get creative, trying to, fit the ball into a tight window, and they're just not getting it done. They're not executing and doing things they honestly didn't really need to do in this game, but they were trying for it, and it just led to so many turnovers. And it makes you wonder, about the offseason, what they were doing. You are seeing with the rotation, it's a little more hectic, honestly, than I thought it was going to be. But what is the communication like? That's where some of this stuff should improve for the Bulls throughout the year. Like, we're not going to see this team, I don't think, have 20-plus turnovers on a regular basis. I just don't see that you have some guys who are really skilled passers on this team. Obviously, Lonzo Ball is a skilled passer. Josh Giddey is a good passer. Kobe White and Ayo are both solid or good passers on any given night. And Zach LaVine, to his credit, a lot of times as well. But just too many turnovers in this game. And we all know, you're not going to win games in the NBA by having 20-plus turnovers. It's just not going to work. It's how you go from having a 1-point scoring difference in the first half to losing 123-111. Because that's where most of it happened. The first half, the vibes were good watching this game. I was excited about what we were seeing on this court, the rotation, seeing the debut of a rookie, which we'll get into a little bit later as well. But, just this team fell apart in the second half. And I don't know if it's, a second half adjustment that we saw from the Pelicans that the Bulls, weren't quite ready for. So, what will it look like in this back-to-back here, coming up on Friday and Saturday will be pretty telling, I think, of who the Bulls are, as a basketball team. Are they responsible with the basketball? Because that they definitely were not tonight. A couple other things that were super negative. Before we do talk about the fun stuff and the good stuff that happened in this game, we're not going to beat on the Bulls for an entire show. We get a long season of potentially bad basketball in front of us, and hopefully it's not that. Hopefully we get more of what we saw in the first half. So we're not going to beat on them, for an entire show. This first one, as you're checking me out, Joe George here on the Locked On Chicago YouTube channel for the first time. One thing that got pointed out quite a bit on the broadcast and we saw it was very, very clear, right? You don't need to be a basketball expert to see that throughout multiple times in this game, the New Orleans Pelicans have guys that are wide open in the paint, wide open at the three-point line, And it didn't look like an effort thing, but the Bulls' rotations were just not good enough. They were not good in this game, and guys were just wide open. It felt like that was more of an issue in the first half, honestly, even than the second half. The turnovers were obviously what led to so many of the Pelicans' points in the second half, but we saw in the first couple possessions of this game where, the Pelicans just have guys that are wide open, and the Bulls players just don't really know, where they're supposed to be. We saw a lot of open threes in this game where, know your player, KYP. They kept Stacey King. I actually never heard that before, to be honest, but I love it. Know your players, on the court. Who's the guys that are elite three-point shooters? Where are they at all times? The Bulls kind of lost that in this game. So sloppy play. It's definitely what stood out in this one. And not to go back to the turnovers too much, I did feel like this because it's a little bit different, but it definitely felt like a lot of times we were seeing the Bulls play a little bit just like out of control in this one. It's expected from guys like Lonzo Ball, who's coming back after 1,000+ days away from the NBA. But we saw Zach LaVine, Kobe White specifically, throughout this game, just kind of go in with reckless abandon towards the paint. And like Kobe White was doing when he was jumping up in the air, if they weren't jumping, they just really had felt like game plan of where to go with the basketball. So just an overall, a lot of sloppiness. The positive of that actually is that all that's fixable. Like throughout the Bulls season, like what we're going to try to figure out, before the game, they talked about how the Bulls players think a lot of us are wrong, that they're not sure that they're as bad as we think that they're going to be, that their over-under total we think is going to be. Well, things like this are things you can fix to prove people wrong, that you are a team that can compete for a play-in tournament in the East. It's not possible for this team to do that. So that's the positive of this game, is that the negatives that happened are largely all fixable. It was a bad shooting night for some of these guys. It was sloppy turnovers. It was too many turnovers, bad rotations, not getting Nikola Vucevic the ball when he's open in the post, which they kept harping on tonight, which I think was very fair to harp on, but they had to keep going to it because he was open in the post or had good matchups, and they just kept ignoring him and taking threes that were unadvised. And sometimes they went in, but they just were ignoring Vooch. It felt like a lot in this game. So all that stuff is stuff that can be a positive, because it's not the end of the world that they didn't, succeed at that in the first game of an 82-game season. They can fix all those problems. Like, that's one of the optimistic points I will take away from this game, is that every problem we saw from the Bulls is absolutely fixable. You weren't even playing Zion, but you have the talent on your roster. Like, there's still a ton of guys that can ball out on this team. So while they lost the first half, I'm going to choose to take the positives from this game and think that the sloppy play that we saw in the second half specifically is something that can go away, can be fixed, and we will see how quickly Billy Donovan can fix that, and maybe prove some of the people wrong about his odds on being the first coach fired this season. Before we talk about Zach LaVine and what he did in the first half, and eventually the debuts and returns that we saw on the Chicago Bulls today, let's hear a word from one of our sponsors.
All right, Bulls fans, you guys know FanDuel is one of the most consistent sponsors we have here over at Locked On, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get the hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It just streamlines the process and makes it so much easier on you that you can do everything all on one page. You can get your analysis, get your stats, get your live play-by-play. You can get everything that you need to make an informed bet on the same page where you place your bets. That just makes everything easier on you. Not a lot of betting sites are offering that, and FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook, is offering you that. Plus, on top of that, you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it when you place your first $5 bet. All you got to do for that is go over to FanDuel.com. Again, that's FanDuel.com to get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet.
Look, I don't know if you guys have these players in sports that you just can't quit, but the Bulls got one for me. And it was the first half of the reason why, that even after an offseason of trade rumors and that people didn't want to trade for him because he didn't really have a market because of his contract. I watch a lot of Zach LaVine play, and I still feel like this is a guy that I can't quit. I want to give up on him. I want the Bulls to trade him, but then I watch the first half where he's got 19 points. He's 5 of 6 from the three-point line, and I'm still just trying to not totally buy back in. But I'm sitting here right now talking to you, and I kind of feel like I want to buy back in about what Zach LaVine can be. Some of that is the returns that we'll talk about, the debuts, the return specifically of Lonzo Ball. But Zach LaVine in the first half tonight was absolutely electric. I mean, that heat check was funny because it was just nowhere near it, but it was a well-deserved heat check. Like 5 for 5 at that point from the three-point line. I think he's 1 or 2 three-pointers now away from being the second Bulls player of all time to have 1,000 three-pointers. Kirk Heinrich, the only other one. And he might even, I think, go past that this season as well. But Zach LaVine was just so much fun in the first half. And one of the things that excited me the most about Zach LaVine, before we get back to the first half, something that we just haven't seen since 2021 was the alley-oop. The alley-oop from Lonzo Ball to Zach LaVine was perfect. It was something that we just haven't seen in so long because of the injury, but to see that back in the Bulls' arsenal was really fun and a really cool thing to see Zach LaVine do and Lonzo Ball do in their first game back together since 2021. And look, this is for LaVine too. I think people forget, like they were pointing this out, and because I kind of forgot, like you think about how bad the end of the season last year, and I wasn't doing this, so interest can wane at times for sure. But this is a guy who hasn't played since January of last year. So to see him back out there in this first game, and a lot of what we saw in the preseason, we saw translate in the first half for the Bulls. And that's just still why, one game in, I want to agree with the players that we are wrong about the Chicago Bulls this year, that there is something to this team, that can help, that can be a play-in team potentially. Feels like they are far ways away from that at times, but there's still so much talent, like we were just talking about, on the Bulls. And I just, LaVine, like I said, like he's just a guy, just can't quit. Like when he's got that jumper going, it's so silky smooth. I want to take him, have him get the ball all the time. Because one of the things that I was curious about with LaVine in this new rotation and roster is honestly just like what is like how quickly do they force him the basketball. And I actually thought it was really interesting that through the first I think it was the first 11 points of the game, not even sure he had a shot. Like they were not forcing him the ball, they were letting things come organically in this offense. And that's a very positive sign for me that Zach's not demanding the basketball, in which a way he would be very valid to do so with the other guys that you have on this roster, especially without DeMar DeRozan being here to take a lot of the shots. So the way they used Zach, I thought was really good in the first half by organically letting him get involved in the offense. And then when he goes scorched earth, just keep giving him the ball. Like keep letting him attack, getting to the paint, taking the three-point shot. But then you get to the second half and just like everything, maybe it's the turnovers mostly. I thought Adam Amin pointed this out really fairly on the broadcast that the Bulls are a team last year, and I think we saw it a little bit tonight, which is a big red flag for this team, that when things go poorly on defense, they go poorly on offense. Like all the positives we saw in the first half, the ball movement was really good. We started to lose a lot of that in the second half. We saw some hero ball shots being taken by multiple guys on the Bulls in the second half as the Pelicans were getting into a 10, 11 point lead and starting to run away with this thing a little bit. And look, and they got it back within 5, with 9 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter, I think it was. So it wasn't over. It ended up not going their way, obviously, in the end, but they tried to make a run at it. So with LaVine, the question is just how do you get him involved in the offense organically without forcing it? Because I was really pleased just with what we saw in the first half. Like if that's the Zach LaVine he can be, not that scorching, hot all the time, but if he can be good like he was in the first half tonight, then I think there's still something that you can build with this basketball team, that you can still build around him. And look, the reality is you're kind of forced to. Like who are you as the Chicago Bulls? Well, it starts with Zach LaVine. If he doesn't have a trade market, and even if he plays like he did in the first half, that doesn't make the Los Angeles Lakers or some team call you and say, we want to give up big-time assets for Zach LaVine, then you still kind of have to build through him in a way. I just don't think the Bulls, the lottery happens, and obviously in the year that they're going to honor Derrick Rose after his retirement, we know the ping pong balls can fall your way. But the Bulls have too much talent on their roster to be in that, 13.5%, percentage point to win the lottery in 2024. I just don't see that, 24-25 season going that poorly. They might be an under 30 win team, but they're not going to be an under 15 win team, an under 20 win team this season. And I know the second half didn't go well, and I know there's a fair reason why a lot of you Bulls fans might feel like this season could go that poorly, but I generally, at the start of the season, like most Bulls fans, most Chicago sports fans are, I'm an eternal optimist. I've been a Bulls fan for a long time, my whole life. And look, if you're listening to this, or you're looking at me and you can't tell how old I am, I was born in 1992, okay? So I don't really remember the Jordan years. Remember that last year and a half? I do have, some good memories of, but so what I'm used to, in my life is the baby Bulls and the heartbreak Derrick Rose Bulls, and what this team has kind of been since 2021 when they got Lonzo and started to try to build around LaVine and eventually DeRozan. And now you have this iteration. And every single year I still go in and I try to be an eternal optimist about what this team could be, and that's why I take from the first half. That's a guy I can't quit, and part of it might be a imposter syndrome here a little bit, or whatever you want to call it, that I can't quit him, that the Bulls might not be able to move on from Zach LaVine, and we might just be here for the 2024-25 season, hoping that with Lonzo Ball and Josh Giddey out on the court, and hopefully Vooch playing well this year, hopefully we'll see Zach LaVine put the Bulls in a position where they can have more success this season than we've seen in the past. And it's a low bar. We're not asking a lot. I would rather see the Bulls be a play-in team and try to make the playoffs than have the 10th pick in the lottery, because honestly you might be the same thing. That's what they were last year, right? They're not going to bottom out this season, because I'm just not sure that, even though the first half was so good, that the trade market for Zach LaVine is all of a sudden just going to boom and you're going to get real valuable assets in return for this guy. So I'm going to take the optimist view. Like I said, I'm going to be excited about Zach LaVine just absolutely cooking in the first half and having 19 points, 5 of 6 from 3, and hope that we can see that continue to just translate throughout the season and get more consistent. And hopefully this will be one of those games where we look back on and we say, okay, the Bulls were better than expected, and that first game, hopefully they learned a lot from the problems that we saw, and maybe we'll feel differently on Friday and Saturday after back-to-back, and maybe the Bulls are 0-3 to start the season. But for today, we'll take the positive view of what it was. The other positive from this game, and really one of the things I was most excited about in this game, was the debuts of Josh Giddey, Matas, and the return of Lonzo Ball. We will get into that next year on the Locked On Bulls postcast on the Locked On Chicago YouTube channel. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. October is the season for wearing masks and costumes, but some of us feel like we wear a mask and hide more often than we want to at work and social settings, around our family. Therapy can help you learn to accept all parts of yourself so you can take off the mask, because masks should be for Halloween, for fun, not for all emotions. We've all been there before. We've all been in an experience where you just kind of feel out of place. I remember when I moved away from Chicago, I kind of felt like I had to put that mask on a little bit. So I definitely hear what they're saying here, because you just got to find a way to be comfortable in your own skin. And therapy is something that, if you need to, you can give it a try. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a shot. It's entirely online, which is super convenient in today's world that we live in, that you can just do this from home. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, so the other part of this game that I was most curious about going to tonight, and really a lot of this season, will be Josh Giddey, Matas Buzelis, and Lonzo Ball. Those are three guys that I think are key guys to watch for all 82 games this season. What are their developments? What is their potential? Who is Lonzo Ball? And, we'll start with Matas tonight. Debuted, not a lot of playing time, came in a weird spot, took the open three, airballed it. Got put in some weird positions as well in this game to, be having, what did he have? He's in the post versus Brandon Ingram. I think that's a strange strategy for a guy who looks like he could use about 20 cheeseburgers to put on some pounds there. But it was cool to see his debut, and he is really the guy. And talk about this team. That might matter the most, honestly, for the Chicago Bulls this year. Like, we know kind of what Io is and Kobe White and Zach LaVine, and I think we have a good feeling of what Josh Giddey is going to be. Obviously, though, he's a new player. Maybe things will be a little bit different for him as a Chicago Bull versus an Oklahoma City Thunder's player. But Matas is, local kid, grew up in Hinsdale. Obviously, you guys all know that. Like, moved around a bunch. But, what does he look like from now to the end of the season? It's going to be really fascinating. Because my other question with him, we see a lot of teams do this, and like it'll be nothing against him if they make this decision. It might be better for him, honestly. Is that even though he made his debut in the first game of the season tonight, he was the 11th man off the bench. And I do wonder, just like with where the Bulls are at as a roster, if seeing the way they used him tonight, if he might be a little bit better off being in the G League to get some more run and kind of develop down there. And each team's philosophy on that is a little bit different. Coaching in the G League versus coaching from Billy Donovan and an NBA staff. But something I'm just going to keep my eye on this season is how much time he spends on the Bulls in Chicago versus the Windy City Bulls in the suburbs. He might be better off there for some of the developmental stuff if he's not going to play a lot, if it's going to be a lot of like what tonight was in the first game of the season of not very important minutes at the end of the game and some okay minutes in the second quarter, but just how they use him. But it was cool to see him make his debut. And one of the things that's nice about it for him is that even though he's the local kid, like he's not under a world of pressure being with the 11th pick in the NBA draft, but would like to see a lot more from him. I do like that he's comfortable taking the three like that, and then he took another one after the air ball. So that is a positive sign. Like, you don't want to see a rookie, or really any player, but specifically a rookie, after an air ball, be scared to take that next shot or be scared to take that first shot. He didn't pass it up. He took it, he missed it, he moved on, he kept playing. So, what he looks like, just as the season goes on is one of the most important parts of the Chicago Bulls 2024-2025 season, that even if they're not a very good basketball team, there will be a lot of guys that we can watch develop and hopefully see what this team can build on, for the future, and, hopefully only be maybe a bad basketball team, and maybe find a way to, more importantly, get out of purgatory here a little bit to be a little bit more competitive. He might be a big piece of that. Not a lot of pressure for the 11th pick in the draft, but a guy that if you hit on him, it can really change a lot of things for this franchise. And even if he's just a key role player, so just what he does the rest of the season, I'm kind of fascinated by. Josh Giddey was the other one. Like, we know he left OKC, didn't want to be there because he wanted to be a starter, and he was not going to be. I did miss Alex Caruso watching this game, just miss watching him as a Chicago Bull. I thought Giddey was, pretty good in some moments. I think he's got some creative stuff he does with passing. When Vooch was out of the floor, it looked like he was playing a little bit of the big man role, a little bit, some good rebounds in there. So I thought like Giddey was solid in his debut. I know there's that rumor floating around that he wanted like $30 million, or that's what he's looking for. Don't see that. But I think you see a player that, maybe he could be, a good starting point guard. Point guard's a loose term with the Bulls. I thought that was fascinating, actually, on a side note. Seeing so many guys bring up the ball, differently, throughout this game, whether it's Io or LaVine or Kobe or, Giddey and Lonzo, like they're all kind of getting run at it of who's bringing the ball up the court. So that was a solid debut for Josh Giddey. Met my expectations. I didn't think he was going to blow me out of the water. Didn't think he was going to be a guy that, bummed me out after his first game. So I give him like a 6 out of 10. That sounds like a failing grade. I guess it's a D, but I don't, we're not going on we're going on a 1 to 10 scale. That's not, in school. So we'll say it's an okay debut for Josh Giddey in this one. The one I was most excited about, though, Lonzo Ball. First game back in over 1,000 days. I think they said 1,016 days for Lonzo Ball. Couple things from this game that just gave me, maybe it's why there's some hope here, for what the Bulls can be. That first three he shot was silky smooth. They talked about in the broadcast, like the fixed jump shot that they worked on in New Orleans when he was there versus that broke thing that he came into the league with when he got drafted by the Lakers. That was a really cool thing to see from Lonzo, to just hit that three In the play before, he was a little bit out of control. I think he had a turnover on that one. But it was cool to see Lonzo back out there and be part of the Bulls. Something I honestly didn't think we were going to see happen. I think I was there like probably going into last season. I just kind of written off the idea that Lonzo Ball would ever, suit up for the Chicago Bulls again. So just a really cool thing for him, the person, the basketball player, to be able to overcome everything that he's had to with these injuries to get back on the court. And maybe he can find a way to, kind of connect this Zach LaVine stuff. Like, they played great basketball together before the injury in 2021. It was exciting times for the Bulls, where it felt like they finally had figured something out. We saw glimpses of that tonight. The alley-oop was electric. Zach LaVine and Lonzo had that connection. It's like they never stopped playing together, and they've been working on it, where Lonzo just floats it up into the air, and Zach LaVine goes up and slams it home. That was a really nice thing to see back in the Bulls offense as well this game. So just something I was pumped about. And those are three guys that, really outside of Zach LaVine this season that I'm most intrigued by for the Bulls in 2024 and 25. Because with LaVine, it's trade value. Lonzo, it's just the person, the story of what he can be, and then the development of potentially Matas and Josh Giddey, and what that turns into for the future of the Chicago Bulls will be vital no matter how this season goes. No matter how many times we do a post-game show live here on Locked On Chicago that is a negative, it's one of those where there's going to be a lot of things we learn about the immediate and the long-term future of the Chicago Bulls. So the Bulls lose 123-111. Like I said at the beginning, if you're listening, we will normally do these live. We had a small technical issue, so we recorded this one. We'll be live on Locked On Chicago for all Bears, Bulls, Cubs, and Notre Dame Fighting Irish post-game shows or postcast shows. We'll go for about 30 minutes, so make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Chicago YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at Joe George Radio. We will talk to you guys on Friday night after the next Bulls game. Peace.